who carries around some... I want to read you an article from LA Times. It says October of 2004. The title of the article is George Soros, the God who carries around some dangerous demons. Here's what he says in the interview. He says, I fancied myself as some kind of God. If truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I felt I had to control, otherwise they might get me in trouble. It is a sort of disease when you consider yourself some kind of God, the creator of everything. Are you ready? Here's how he finishes it. But I feel comfortable about it now since I began to live it out. To learn about this man named George Soros, who's 92 years old. Why would you be intimidated by this guy? So what if he's made somewhere between $50 to $70 billion in his career, and currently his net worth is $7 billion? Yeah, he's given $32 billion to different organizations such as Open Society Organization and some others. Yeah, he's supported a lot of different presidents, a lot of different candidates, a lot of different people. Why are people so scared of him? Is this guy a puppet master? Is he evil? Is he a good person? Is he a bad person? Is he a humanitarian? Maybe he's just a father. Maybe he just wants to support some cause. Why are you so worried about him? All of those are great questions. Today, we're going to study his childhood, upbringing as an adult, how he became an investor where he made all the money, Karl Popper, who is this Karl Popper guy, and who he's given money to.
Try, swear.
And who he's given money to over the years. Let's get right into it. All right, so he was born August 1930 in Budapest, Hungary, originally named Georgi Schwartz, but his father later changed the family surname to Soros, a more Hungarian-sounding name to protect them from increasing anti-Semitic sentiment in Hungary. His father, Tivadar, was a lawyer and a passionate promoter of Esperanto, an artificial language created in the late 19th century, intended to foster harmony between people from different cultures. His father's decision to teach Esperanto was an early indication of commitment to an open-mindedness and understanding of different cultures that George would carry into his later life. George Soros was 14 during the Nazi occupation of Hungary in 1944. His father secured false identities for the family, identifying themselves as Christians. George Soros was tasked with being a courier who helped Nazis identify Jews and confiscate their property. And in a 1998 60-minute interview, he was asked if this was a traumatizing experience, and this is how he responded.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all.
So a lot of people who didn't know who George Soros was, they watched his interview and they said, this guy sounds like a sociopath. How could you say something like that? Some others said, well, maybe he was numb as a 14-year-old. Imagine you're going through it and you see stuff like that. By the way, at the same time when this is taking place, he had another traumatic experience. Two of the liberators that were helping them out, Russian liberators, they raped his mother, and his mother talked about it. So this kid, all this pain, all this anger, all this frustration, all these experiences, all happening at the same time. You have to live a fake life so they don't kill you, act like you're a Christian, help the Nazis, find Jews, your mom's going through this, you're working with Russians, all of that together at a young age. What does that do to you? So now let's look at George Soros as a young adult. After the war, Hungary fell under the communist rule. In 1947, Soros left Hungary for England. He worked as a waiter and a railway porter to support his studies at the London School of Economics. During this time, he meets the man that had the most influence in his life. This is according to his words, Karl Popper. Now, who is Karl Popper? Karl Popper was a philosopher of science and epistemologist, best known for his principle of falsifiability. So what did Karl Popper really believe in? These are some of the philosophies that he had. Number one, falsifiability. He proposed that for a theory to be considered scientific, it must be potentially falsifiable. This means there must be a potential observation or experiment that could prove the theory false. Number two, the principle of falsifiability was designed to solve the demarcation problem, the problem of distinguishing between science and non-science or pseudoscience. Number three, critique of historicism. He argued against the idea that history unfolds according to predictable laws or patterns. He promoted the idea idea that human actions can significantly influence the course of history. 4, open society is what he believed in, which, by the way, later on, Soros starts a foundation called Open Society Foundation. Here's what open society means to Karl Popper. The open society and its enemies. Popper defended liberal democracy and criticized totalitarianism. He depicted democratic societies as open, self-correcting systems. And last point, influence and critique. While Popper's philosophy has been influential, it has been subject to debate and critique. Despite this, he remains one of the most widely read philosophers of the 20th century. So those were his philosophies, Karl Popper, but this is how he influenced George Soros. So number 1 was the philosophy of open society. Keep in mind, this is in the late 40s, early 50s. Instead of promoting totalitarian regimes such as communism and fascism, it was about replacing it with individual freedom, democratic governance, and a flexible, changing social and economic structure. This is what he wanted to do. Number 2, followabilism, the belief that all knowledge is tentative, provisional, and subject to revision in light of new evidence. This influenced Soros' investment strategy, and he always talks about the fact that he was ready to adjust his positions if the facts changed. Number 3 is critical thinking. So Soros adopted this in his investment strategy, where he was often willing to go against conventional wisdom, but also in his philanthropic activities, encouraging open debate and discussion. And last but not least, humanitarian efforts. This has significantly influenced Soros' philanthropic efforts, which has focused on civil society, education, and human rights around the globe. Or at least that's what he claims to focus on. So while he's getting clear on his philosophies, he's picking up from Karl Popper. At the same time, Europe is in shambles. The Marshall Plan is being executed from U.S. by George Marshall, Secretary of State. They're sending $13 to $15 billion to Europe in fuel, food, different ways to help out. He's seeing this, saying there may be a need for a global Marshall Plan. I'd love to be a part of that. That also kind of inspired him a little bit. So we just learned a little bit about his childhood, adulthood, and how his philosophies are getting clear. Now let's look at how he does in finance. So let me put it to you this way. From 1970 till 2000, if you had to throw names out there on who are the best money managers, you would find the name Buffett, you would find the name Soros, and later on you would find the name Dalio. From 1970 to 2000, he starts a fund called Quantum Fund. It's still around, but during that period, average annual rate of return, 30%. And he had some years that was 60+%. Every year. And of course, it helped in many cases when these guys were operating on offshore laws, not having to abide by SEC, U.S. tax code, all the stuff that we had going on here. That is a form of an edge that he had. But at the same time, he was either the best or one of the top 3 best during his time. So now, Soros had 2 things when it came out to his investment philosophy. One of it was fallibility, and the other one was reflexivity. Let's look at both. Number 1, the theory of fallibility is a concept stemmed from the philosophical understanding that it's impossible to achieve perfect knowledge. In other words, humans are inherently flawed in their understanding and judgment. The theory is mainly used to explain the limitations of human comprehension and decision-making in complex systems like economics. This fallibility is often magnified by cognitive biases, incomplete information, and the emotions of the individual. And the second theory was the theory of reflexivity. And here's what reflexivity is. It's the idea that people's perception and beliefs influence their decision-making, which in turn impacts the state of the world, changing the fundamentals that they are trying to understand. This then further alters their perceptions and beliefs, creating a continuous reflexive feedback loop. He openly talks about how he used some of these philosophies to actually manipulate the markets in his favor and make billions of dollars. We'll look at a couple of the times he did this, but he said this once in his book. This is what makes propaganda so effective, because the complexity of the world we live in exceeds our ability to understand it. Confronted by a reality of extreme complexity, we are obligated to resort to various methods of simplification. Pretty wild.
You want ads?
Resort to various methods of simplification. Pretty wild, sharp, shrewd, you can call a lot of different names, but here's how we use those philosophies to make billions. Number 1, the British pound in 1992. This is the most famous example George Soros used to influence the market by betting against the British pound in 92. He believed that the pound was overvalued and that the British government would have to devalue the currency. He was proven right when the British government was forced to withdraw the pound from the European exchange rate mechanism. Soros bet $10 billion and made a profit of $1 billion from this trade, nicknamed the man who broke the Bank of England. According to the Shadow Party book, Soros admits that this bet was taking money out of the pockets of British taxpayer, but says, if I had taken social consequence into account, it would have thrown off my risk-reward calculation and profits would have been refused. Can you imagine thinking that way? It's pretty wild. I'm going to give you 4 other examples where it'll validate his reflexivity or his fallibility philosophy. The second one would be the German Deutschmark in 1993. He wrote a letter to the Times of London stating that he expected the mark to fall against all major currencies, which immediately triggered panic selling. Again, this is reflexivity. The next one, Asian financial crisis in 1997. During the Asian financial crisis, Soros investment activities were blamed by some for exasperating the crisis. Malaysia's then Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad accused Soros of destabilizing regional economies through currency speculation. Then he also did something similar in Russia. The Russian ruble 1998, he told Financial Times of London that Russia should devalue the ruble by 15 to 25%, causing widespread panic selling. And the last example, here's the dollar in 2004. Soros announced a short position against the dollar on CNN at a time when the dollar had been quickly declining against the euro, pushing the dollar down even further. So this was his way of making money. It was one of the ways, finding ways to manipulate the market. Now, a lot of other people have done it, but he mastered it, took it to a whole different level. And then eventually in late 70s, when his net worth was $25 million, he says he felt a certain sense of emptiness. And that's where, the political activist in him came out, the philanthropy came out, and many call him the wealthiest political activist of all time. And these are some of the projects he funded. So remember the word Open Society he picked up earlier from Karl Popper. Later on in April of 1993, he starts the Open Society Foundation. And then in 2017, Open Society Foundation announced that Soros had transferred $18 billion of his fortune to Open Society, making it a total of $32 billion he had given to Open Society Foundation since 1984. In case you missed it, one more time, $32 billion. That's $32 billion of his own money. Not, hey, let's go raise money. His own money he put into it. And whether it's through its Open Society Foundation or other ways of giving money, he contributed and influenced media, politics, colleges, universities. So let me just kind of share with you some of the numbers so you kind of have an idea. And in 2004, Soros spent more than $27 million just to help defeat President Bush. If it's colleges, where Open Society spent $50 million per year to influence colleges, between 2014 to 2018, Soros donated $184 million to 171 colleges in 51 countries. That's 10% of all foundations during that time. They also created Open Society University Network, but he knew one of the ways to influence was to get colleges and universities. And when you give that kind of money, those universities kind of have to listen to what you have to say. Or media. He's had a lifelong fascination with media. He has connections with more than 30 mainstream news outlets, including New York Times, WAPO, Associated Press, CNN, and ABC. Prominent journalists like ABC's Christiane Amanpour, New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson, and former Post editor and now Vice President Len Downey serve on the boards of operations that take Soros cash. A 2011 estimate indicates that media organizations influenced by Soros have a reach of an estimated 300 million people per month. In end of Q1 of 2021, Soros' largest stock holding was Liberty Broadband, over $600 million. And Liberty Broadband's largest asset is Charter Communications and its subsidiaries, which together are the second largest cable operator in the U.S. Another large holding he has is Viacom CBS. Subsidiaries include Paramount Pictures and Simon & Schuster, which means he also influences books, what's being bought, what's not being bought, what we'll publish, what we won't publish. That's a lot of power there in media. And recently, he just made an offer to buy Vice for $400 million. Another one is Trump. Obviously, him and Trump are not going out to golfing together, and they're not best friends. He cannot stand Trump. He once said, nationalism is the great threat of the open society. He said this at World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. He says it there. Of course, World Economic Forum is not a fan of Trump. And he called Trump the ultimate narcissist and said there's nothing more important than defeating him in 2020 election. It's kind of weird when you call somebody a narcissist when you think, you think you're God. Isn't the ultimate narcissist somebody that thinks they're God? I don't know if I know anybody in my life I've met that say, hey, I'm God. I feel like I finally am living my life where I'm like God, but I'm not a narcissist. I'm a very humble man. That's what I am. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that I'm also not saying Trump is not a narcissist. At this level playing field, you can't call anybody a narcissist because everybody has a little bit of it to get to this level. So there's a lot of things you can call people. Narcissist is probably not one of them because everybody in the room is one. So obviously, seeing a guy like Trump being president wasn't something that was exciting for him. AP News once said about mail-in voting, June 18, 2020, a network of deep-pocketed progressive donors are launching a $59 million effort to encourage people of color to vote by mail. Philanthropic organizations, including Ford Foundation and George Soros Open Society, to raise the money. That's in 2000. Election. He was a part of it. to help with that. He's pretty much been involved in every single election since 2000, doing his best to help Al Gore beat George Bush, which obviously didn't happen. That was a failed one. In 2004, he reportedly spent $27 million trying to defeat George Bush with John Kerry. 2008, he supported Barack Obama. 2012, he continued to support Barack Obama. 2016, he spent $22 million supporting Hillary Clinton and other Democratic candidates. In 2020, he spent $70 million trying to help Biden beat Trump, which he succeeded. And if that's not enough, he's so strategic. He even goes after district attorneys. Matter of fact, George Soros funded DAs represent 20% of Americans, okay? He funneled $40 million into local races to elect 75 progressive prosecutors over the last decade. So some of you may be watching and saying, Pat, what's the big deal? This guy became a billionaire. He became rich. He gave $32 billion. Who cares who he wants to give his money to? Let him give his money to whoever he wants to give it to. I don't say anything's wrong with that. If that's what he wants to do, more power to him. That's his cause. He's doing what he's doing. He's got 5 kids, family, all this stuff, and he supports his cause. But here's the problem. The problem is, what do you believe in? So the other day we're having a conversation. The conversation went this way. A nationalist gets a lot of criticism. You're a nationalist if you love America. Okay, fair. What is the antonym of being a nationalist, a globalist? Well, if I'm a nationalist, you're a globalist. Why do we need borders? Do we just have open society where there's no borders? Because these men who are inspired and so ambitious, they want to control the world? What is your job to do? Lead your family, protect your home, protect your borders, protect your nation. If you're a nationalist, this guy doesn't support your philosophy. If you're a globalist, this guy supports your philosophy. You pick and choose which one you want to be. And by the way, some people are saying, well, wait till he dies. It's going to be all right. It's going to be this. No, all this stuff people fear. Oh, this guy's going to do this. That guy's going to. Everything's going to, like Oprah Winfrey once said, all these Republicans need to die off and then everything's going to be normal. That's not how life works. He's got a 38-year-old son named Alexander who has visited the Biden White House 14 times since he's been in office. He met with everybody there, whether it's the National Security Advisor or advisors to Biden's then Chief of Staff or National Security Advisor's Executive Assistant. It doesn't matter. He is ambitious and he's his father's son and he's going to continue the legacy. So this Soros name ain't going away, but it's definitely something and someone you need to know more about.